Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Korlick with Figure It Out Productions. The following video is part of our Quick Shoot series.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and I've got a package from the UK, specifically from retrotowers.co.uk. Really awesome retro gaming site. I've done business with them a lot. I think they're awesome. But enough of that. Let's go into the product, and let's just go ahead and rip that open. Inside we have a card for Retro Towers. You can go ahead. They also have a Facebook page apparently. Check them out. But here's the actual item. Yes, this is an EverDrive for the Game Boy. Now, if you're not familiar with what the EverDrive line is, it's basically a series of flash cards made by this guy named Krix, who lives in Ukraine. And he makes them all by himself. They're not like mass-produced in China or anything. They're made with love. Actually, it says right on the back, made in Ukraine, and it's got his website at the bottom, krix.com. So what the EverDrive is, like I said, it's a flash card. So the way it really works is it's a cartridge for whatever system, in this case the Game Boy and Game Boy Color. And then there's other ones for like the N64, the Genesis, the 32X, the Master System, you know, cartridge systems. SNES as well. Basically, you can load an SD card into them, either a full size or a mini, depending on what it is. This one looks like it takes mini. And you can throw on like every ROM for like every game ever made, put them all on there, and then bam, you have this one cartridge that contains every game ever for that console, which is pretty awesome. Now, so they're pretty easy to use. They're pretty user friendly. As long as you have like a very basic knowledge of, you know, how to drop files from one place to another, you should be good to go. Getting the ROMs you'll have to do on your own. It does not come with that, and typically it doesn't come with an SD card either. You generally have to go buy those yourselves, depending on who you buy it from. Sometimes they can be more expensive as a result. So typically I recommend not buying it with an SD card because you can usually find an SD card for cheap. So that's just a recommendation, depending on what you want. So I think, all right. So I want to talk a little bit about EverDrives as a concept. Basically, when you take like a cartridge and you put it into a console, it's just like a PCB board, and it has like one single ROM on it, and the console has no choice but to load up that one ROM. What the EverDrive does is this is a simplified explanation of it, but basically it has like a little bit of software on it that it loads up first, and has no choice but to load that, and then that software allows you to access the SD card. So where I'm going with this is that this is not emulation. None of them are. They are hardware perfect, and that is what makes them impressive. It makes it really awesome. And the reason I support something like this, because I know a lot of you guys know I do not support like digital content and stuff, and I certainly don't endorse piracy either. But the reason you get something like this is because I'm a collector. You know, I like to have a lot of games that I preserve. They're not just games that I thumb through and play and I don't take good care of them. I care about my collection. So the advantage of owning something like this is that I can load all the ROMs for the games I do own, and in the cases, of course, you load up the ones you don't have just because it's whatever. And I can play them that way. And then I can leave my authentic copies alone and never have to deal with them. I don't have to like ruin their condition or anything, and I can still play them. And if there's a game you're looking into, you're like, oh, I really want to try that game, but I don't know if I want to blow like 60 bucks or whatever the game costs on it. Why don't I try it out, see if I like it, and then you're like, you know what, I like it, this is worth the purchase, and bam, you go ahead and get it. So that's why I really like these. They're also usually exceptionally well made. I've never had any issues with them. I think they're really great. So every time a new one comes out, I typically get my hands on it. And so Game Boy EverDrive, you've got a lot to live up to, and I'm assuming you will.
Alright, I've got the EverDrive all fired up here. Now this is being played on the GameCube via the Game Boy player, and I'm using the component cables, so we're running this in 480p so we can get the best possible image quality out of this. Just so you guys can see what the menu looks like, so I didn't have to like film, you know, with a camera and like look at this Game Boy screen. This is what you would see regardless of what kind of device you play it back on. Now ignore those top two folders. I actually use the same mini SD card for my NES and Famicom EverDrives as I do with this one. You can share them because the entire ROM library does not take up much space. So I made those two folders, Game Boy and Game Boy Color, and you saw there for a minute that you can do things like cheats and get information. This thing has like a built-in Game Shark or Game Genie type function. So inside of the Game Boy directories, you make other directories based on regions. Now that's up to you. That's just organization. So I selected each region, and then I put in things like unlicensed games and translated games and stuff like that. Stuff that was never actually released, you can actually put on here and play legitimately. Well, I guess it's technically not legitimate because you don't own it, but you know what I'm saying. Like, you can play it on actual hardware. So I'm going to fire up a Game Boy Color game, Resident Evil Gaiden, and you have the option of loading it and then playing it immediately or just loading it. But basically what's happening here is it erases any pre-existing ROM that's been loaded, and then it writes the new one. And with Game Boy Color games, this takes, like a minute because they're bigger. Not that they're big, they're like 4 megabytes, but, it takes a little bit. And then it fires up. Now, so basically what that means is that when you turn off the the Game Boy and turn it back on, it will boot up to that original menu that you saw. Or you can tell at that point you can just tell it to start, and it will play the most previously loaded game. Resident Evil. By the way, it's hilarious when that thing tries to talk. Resident Evil Gaiden. I always wanted to play that game, but I could never imagine actually sitting down and doing it. But anyway, so yeah, if we load back up here, Resident Evil Gaiden is still in there, so I could just press start and play it right away. That's the advantage of loading a game, I guess, is if you load it but don't start it, you can actually go back. That's how you enable the cheat function. You would enable you would load the game, enable cheats on it, and then start it. Does that make sense? Good. I hope it does. Now anyway, we're going to play an original Game Boy game. And this one is my favorite Game Boy game of all time. Obviously, that's open to debate with other people, but this is my personal preference. Is Super Mario 2: Legend of the 6 Gold Coins. Now, this is the reason I picked this, other than just knowing this game very well, is that it has quick saving, and I wanted to show you this because this is pretty neat. Now, the EverDrive is very good at supporting game saves. So what that means is in this game you make progress and the game saves, right? So you can see it says 0-1 because I've played before. Now that's awesome because I can actually stop, not only can I stop playing this game and it'll save that, but I can actually load up another ROM like you saw before, Resident Evil Gaiden, and it will keep my save. It will keep all your saves. So you don't have to fear like, oh, I have to play through the entire game because as soon as I load up a new ROM, it's going to erase my save, because that doesn't happen. It saves it.
Time for final thoughts. I've been playing with this a lot on both my GameCube and, of course, my brand new sweet GBA. If you guys haven't seen my video on this, go back and check it out. Kick-ass, backlit, modded Game Boy Advance. But again, that's not the point of the video. This is. And so with that in mind, this is something I would definitely recommend. It lives up in every way to all the other EverDrives. Build quality is totally solid, and it does the thing it's supposed to do. It's got solid it's got solid build quality, and yeah, I really have no complaints. It does what it's supposed to do. So the only negatives that really exist are things that were never a secret, but I figure I'll report them to you just in case you're not sure. So again, bear that in mind. They're not truly negatives because it never lied to me about these type of things. It doesn't play Game Boy Advance games, so that's a negative. Would I like it to? Obviously, and hopefully there will be a Game Boy Advance EverDrive at some point, but be aware that this one does not support that. So what that means is that it will not work on like the DS or the Micro, etc. You won't be able to play it on there. So it only supports Game Boy and Game Boy Color. And so when you stick it into like a Game Boy Advance or an SP or a Game Boy Color itself or the GameCube, you'll be able to play the entire Game Boy library or the entire Game Boy Color library. But if you were to put it into an original Game Boy or the Super Game Boy for the Super Nintendo, it will still work, but it will only be able to play original Game Boy games, not Game Boy Color games. If you try to load up a Game Boy Color game, it'll just display the title of the game and say like, this is a Game Boy Color game, I can't play that. The only one I had any issues with, and I think this is really my issue, this wouldn't be something that necessarily would affect you, was the Game Boy Pocket. I tried getting it to run on there and I just couldn't. And I think it has nothing to do with the cartridge itself, really. The thing is that the Game Boy Pocket uses AAA batteries where the others all use AA. And I don't have any extra AAA batteries around. The pair that's in my Game Boy Pocket have been in there for like, oh, I don't know, a decade. So I was kind of amazed it even turned on at all. But it was able to load a regular cartridge. It was not able to load this. And I think that's likely just because those batteries are obviously virtually dead. And it's amazing, like I said, it's amazing it turned on at all. And I'm guessing it just didn't have enough power to like kick this over and actually get it started. If I had spare batteries, I could test that, or if I had a charger, I would. But thing is, man, I'm never going to play this on the Game Boy Pocket, and I never need AAA batteries for anything. So, especially when I own this, you know, this is the greatest Game Boy Advance ever. I would just always use this, so there's no reason to go out and buy those. So my guess is if you had good batteries, it would work just fine. But the one thing that does tell me, though, is that this cartridge probably requires a little bit more power than the average one, especially because it has a light on it. I don't think you guys wouldn't have seen this, of course, when I was recording, but there's a light on it that lets you know that it's on, it's functioning, and that it's doing something. And it like blinks and stuff when it's like loading. So if you have this plugged in and you're not seeing the light, then it's not working. Though I guess when you didn't see a screen pop up, that would probably let you know too. So whatever. Yeah, that's really it. I would actually recommend this, just like all the other EverDrives. I've never ever found one that I thought like, man, that was a waste. They should have tried that again. No, this was pretty good. And if you're interested, go to retrotowers.co.uk, pick one up. I can help you out with that a little bit. If you use my name as a coupon code, which I'll display there, you get 5% off of your order on this or anything else on that website. So have fun, and you're welcome. And really, that's it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all later.